Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of the hour. Kiev's mayor says nearly every district came under massive dawn attacks, with 4 killed and dozens injured. Russia had fired hundreds of drones and missiles while claiming it downed over 200 Ukrainian drones in retaliation. Russia's FSB says it has foiled a Ukrainian plot to kill a top government official and accuses Kyiv of planning more attacks nationwide. The Defense Ministry also says air defenses downed or intercepted 216 Ukrainian drones overnight. France says President Macron will host Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris on November the 17th to reaffirm long-term support. The leaders will also discuss energy, economic ties and defence cooperation. British Culture Minister Lisa Nandy says the BBC was right to apologise to President Trump after a panorama edit created a misleading impression of his January the 6th speech. She says the broadcaster didn't meet the highest standards and deservedly accepted fault. The Trump administration has designated 4 European left-wing networks as terrorist organizations, citing past bomb attacks and links to anti-fascist groups. The move lets Washington target any US support, even as most groups operate loosely and entirely in Europe. 2 74-year-old Jehovah's Witnesses have been jailed in Russia based on testimony from an undercover spy who infiltrated their meetings. The men are now the oldest of 175 witnesses imprisoned since the group was banned as extremist in 2017. Poland says it will reopen 2 Belarus border crossings on November the 17th after closing them over Russian military drills and drone incursions. Warsaw had delayed the move to show solidarity with Lithuania amid regional security concerns. The Financial Times says UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has dropped plans to raise income tax rates in this month's budget to avoid a political backlash. The move has alarmed some investors who have pushed up government borrowing costs. We start this hour in Eastern Europe, and President Volodymyr Zelensky said overnight Ukrainian forces struck Russian targets with long Neptune missiles in response to a massive Russian missile attack. He added the strikes were just a response and strengthened Ukraine's defense, with missiles showing increasing accuracy and range. Ukrainian air defenses repelled the night attack, neutralizing 14 targets, including aeroballistic and ballistic missiles. Zelensky says Patriots and other systems worked without failures, protecting Ukraine's skies. Russia continued attacks on Ukrainian cities and critical infrastructure, with Kyiv's residential areas and energy facilities targeted. That same night, Russian cities Novorossiysk and Saratov were hit by drones, causing fires and infrastructure damage. Okay, now joining us to discuss the recent developments in the Ukraine conflict is Alison Mutler. She's the former Associated Press Bureau Chief, and she joins us live from Bucharest in Romania. Alison, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. Of course, President Zelensky says Ukraine used these long Neptune targets inside Russian territory. How significant is this shift, and what does it say about Ukraine's current military capabilities, but what else do they want?
Well, Zelensky has been asking the United States for Tomahawk missiles for a long time, months I think now. Donald Trump hasn't outright said no, but he certainly hasn't said yes. And so it's still an issue. They want these long-range missiles so they can strike key infrastructure, key energy depots in Russia. So they're now using some Ukrainian missiles, Neptune, and they have a range, I understand, of 1,000 kilometers. So that's what they're looking for, long-range missiles. And it shows that Ukraine, if it can't get the missiles it wants from the United States or from Europe, that it will go ahead and press ahead and use its own weaponry, its own arms. So it's important that, I suppose, Ukraine is showing some sort of independence and some resilience as well, but also it's trying to show some autonomy, that it's not just because he's been accused before of always going around begging for money, etc., for the war effort. He stresses that the war effort in Ukraine is not just a defense of Ukraine, but also of Europe. But this development shows you that Ukraine is producing its own weapons and is producing the long-range missiles that Ukraine says it needs to repel Russia to strike key energy locations.
Yes, and Alison, of course, Kyiv just endured one of its deadliest Russian attacks in weeks, with 4 killed across the Ukrainian capital. Do you see this as a Russian retaliation to Kyiv hitting these oil refineries that it has been in the past few weeks?
For certain, I think it's a retaliation. Russia is very angry. It doesn't suit it at all that Ukraine has taken this its defense to another step, in that it's being, it's counterattacking, if you like. It's trying to strike Russian targets before to weaken Russia's attack on Ukraine. So obviously, striking the capital is not just it's nothing to do with where the ethnic Russian population is. It's an attack on the heart of Ukraine, and this was a very heavy attack. I think there were hundreds of drones involved and 18 missiles involved. 4 people died, and I think dozens were injured, and a lot of people were displaced. They had to evacuate their homes. Buildings were damaged. So it was I think Zelensky called it a very wicked attack. Particularly, winter's coming, and a lot of the people who were targeted and who were injured or were killed were women and children. So yes, I do think it's a retaliation of Russia saying, well, if you're going to strike our energy centers, or you're going to make strategic strikes on our infrastructure, then we are going to hit you hard, and we're going to hit you where it hurts in your capital, and we're going to kill a lot of people.
Yes, Alison, we have more on that as well. Do stay with us, where Ukrainian officials have reported that at least 4 people were killed and dozens more wounded in a Russian strike which hit a newly built residential complex in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. Adding on, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russian forces used 430 drones and 18 missiles, marking one of the largest strikes on the capital so far. The building, which had no tenants, was left with rubble-filled corridors and apartments without windows. Sunlight streamed through the openings where glass once stood. Alison joins us once again. Alison, 430 drones and 18 missiles have been launched at these high-rise buildings in the Ukrainian capital. What can you tell us about the current state of the aerial warfare in this conflict now, as 430 drones towards the capital overnight from Moscow? Substantial number.
There's reports that it's the biggest one ever. It's showing that Russia is not backing down. Russia will continue, and Russia will not just press in on the eastern flank, which it wants to grab for its territory. It will strike at the heart of Ukraine, on its capital, and it will strike not as Ukraine is hitting strategic and energy centers, but Russia will strike civilians. It's been this latest aerial attack, which is very hard to defend against, struck residential buildings. Now, I think from what you're reporting, it could have been worse. There could have been people in those residential buildings, but they were new. But it still had a terrible effect. As you said, 4 people dead and dozens injured. And it was a massive attack. But it's also a psychological warfare, because there were, as you said, there were 430 drones, 18 missiles. That must have gone on for a long time, and that would have caused a lot of trauma and distress to the residents of Kiev. And it's psychological. It's Russia saying that no place is out of bounds, and we're coming to get you, and we will strike civilians. This is not about just grabbing territory or neutralizing Ukrainian energy centers.
Yes, and Alison, what else was hit last night was the Russian Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. This was hit in a Ukrainian attack. How have you analysed the Ukrainian tactics when it comes to hitting Russian energy infrastructure and ports, and how effective do you think they've been?
I think, first of all, in terms of how the news plays out, it's effective to strike energy infrastructure because it weakens Russia's attack, and it weakens Russia generally. But it has a better look, if you like, because they're not striking civilians. It's not about killing people. It's about weakening Russia. And Ukraine has proved in the last year or so, they've been proved quite good at this, that they are using these long range missiles, the ones they used last night, but they have been striking around the Black Sea, which is a very heavily contested area. And the aim is to weaken Russia's infrastructure, and Ukraine so far has been doing it quite successfully. And I imagine that they will continue doing this because their aim isn't to kill Russians, quote unquote, apart from if there's armed combat or it's actually on the ground. But their aim is to weaken Russia, so Russia can't. Their attack against Ukraine is much harder.
Yes, Alison, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the conflict for our viewers. The German Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius, is hosting a meeting in Berlin on Friday with his counterparts from France, the UK, Italy, Poland, and also EU Foreign Affairs representative Kaja Kallas. The Group of Five, as it is so called, meeting marking its one-year anniversary, aims to discuss further military aid to Ukraine and tackle hybrid threats from facing Europe. Discussions will also focus on enhancing security, strengthening the defence industry and evaluating European readiness in the light of shifting global security dynamics. The meeting, established after the election of US President Donald Trump, serves as a platform to address concerns about the reliability of the United States as an alliance partner. NATO's new joint defence plans have helped diffuse tensions in the alliance, for now allowing for more focused European cooperation. Alison joins us once again. Alison, this group of five, the UK, Italy, France, Germany, and of course the EU foreign leader, a lot of people criticise the European allies for kind of launching this scorched earth policy on Ukraine. Is this and keeping this war going longer than it should? That's what some people think. Is this a sign? Is this meeting a sign that European capitals are preparing for an even longer war, especially as US funding remains uncertain?
I think Europe is definitely preparing for a longer war. You mentioned the five countries, four of those which are EU, and then you have Britain. Britain is not an EU member, but it is a member of NATO. So this is not just an EU war, it's a European war. Europe wants to defend itself so the conflict doesn't spread any further. And on the one hand, there is criticism that Europe wants to prolong this war, but the Russians have not shown any willingness to talk or to cede any of their demands. They have maximalist demands, which are not acceptable to Ukraine, are not acceptable to Europe. So Russia is pressing on. It's escalating its attacks. They've made threats about nuclear weapons, and it would be very foolish on the part of Europe and NATO to do nothing about this. So that as much as anything, this meeting today in Berlin is about preparing both what is going to happen next. I'm sure there's a lot of intelligence on the ground about what Russia's plans are, but also Russia has this two-pronged war on Europe. They have the war against Ukraine and the threats against NATO members, violation of NATO airspace, but they also have this hybrid war, which Europe has been very slow, the West has been very slow about waking up to it. But this week, Europe launched something called the Democracy Shield, which is ways that Europe will counter Russian disinformation, because it might sound very vague, a hybrid war, but Russia's hybrid war actually aims to undermine democratic societies, liberal democracies, make citizens distrustful of their governments, and basically make make people actually want to be in a dictatorship. That's their aim. Putin, the Kremlin, they dislike democracy. They dislike the West. They dislike Europe. And Europe is in a position, it's not a position of attack, it's a position of trying to defend itself. And particularly because under Donald Trump, the American position has changed somewhat. America hasn't withdrawn, but it is less reliable than it was before.
Yes.
Europe has to organize its own defense, both in terms of the hybrid war and also possible escalation of Russia's military war against Ukraine.
Yeah, and Alison, of course, this Western support, some would also say it's becoming much more fragmented. Of course, you see the United States, where no one knows what Donald Trump is thinking at any given time. Of course, you have Hungary, Viktor Orban, who have openly do not associate with all the European Union's letters coming out in support of Kyiv. Does this meeting here reveal genuine unity, or are cracks widening behind the scenes, do you think?
No, I think we have the coalition, the willing, which is a bit larger, but I think this is the core defense of Europe. And okay, Britain is not in the European Union, but it is a key member of NATO, and it has very good intelligence there. And also, Britain has played a very important, a crucial role in the defense of Ukraine from day number one. So I think it's like this is the core defense of Europe, both on the hybrid and the military. These are the countries that count. These are the countries that will make the decision. So I think that Europe is firming up. We have dissenting voices, as you said, in Hungary and Slovakia, and they will remain. So the bigger countries, the countries which are very clear about European defense, they have to unite. And they have to forge ahead with defense of Europe, because they can't rely on the wider partnership. Of course, countries like Romania plays a key role, but they're not the decision makers in the defense of Ukraine.
Yes, Alison Mutler, thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. Really appreciate you giving your time for us here on NewsX World. We now move on, and in a significant diplomatic move, French President Emmanuel Macron is set to host Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Paris on November the 17th. The meeting, announced by Macron's office, aims to reaffirm France's steadfast commitment to Ukraine's security amidst ongoing challenges. The two leaders are expected to discuss a range of topics, including bilateral cooperation in energy, economic matters and defence. This high-level meeting underscores France's ongoing support for Ukraine's sovereignty and stability, as the war with Russia continues to impact the region. Macron and Zelensky had previously met in Brussels, where they discussed broader European issues, including defence and migration. The Paris talks are expected to further strengthen ties between the two nations. We are now joined by Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, and she joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this is a classic example of unwavering European support for Ukraine, particularly headed by Emmanuel Macron, who has been a big leader in regards to standing in Zelensky and maintaining that idea of European security. Your thoughts on this upcoming meeting? We are going to see Zelensky in Paris in just 3 days. What are the issues that you think are going to be tackled here, and what is there to address?
Greetings, Thomas. Thank you so much for inviting me. What I do understand is that Zelensky is headed for his 9th visit, I believe this is, to meet with Macron since 2022. And the stated cause is energy cooperation and future of security of Ukraine and so on and such. But there are also rumors under the geopolitical spheres that we hear that are saying that the allies, European allies, are also asking questions about the large-scale corruptions that are happening inside Ukraine. And Zelensky's associates have been found involved in it, and there have been resignations also regarding it. And so I believe Europe is looking to find a way to solving the entire Ukraine problem. They know that this is heading into the winter. They know that there has been a large-scale attack on almost every district I think these are the words of some of the Ukrainian ministers themselves, that every district is now facing large-scale attacks by Russia. And although the Long Neptune and the other drones have managed to dent at least one particular region in Russia to where the attacks led to a declaration of emergency in that particular region, this is not enough. While Ukraine is losing bleeding soldiers, losing resources, facing rollouts of blackouts and all, there is no solution, and the winter is setting in, and it's going to be very, very hard for the Ukrainians. And the war, if it continues in these winter months, maybe Russia will grab more land and they will be not able to prevent it. So while the drone technology has delivered a massive victory in terms of the amount of damage that they are able to inflict on Russia itself, it does not change the tide of war. It just manages to pause it for a while. And Russia is in a meat grinder war. It's gaining more and more territories. And if this continues, more than half of Ukraine will be lost by the time the winter is done with. So until and unless Zelensky wants to lose not just his elections or his political standing, until and unless Zelensky wants to lose the identity of Ukraine as a whole nation, he should gear up for a hard winter and tough negotiations on ground, and probably accept a land for peace deal.
Yes, Shruti, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the region. The United States has designated 4 European entities as global terrorist groups, accusing them of being violent Antifa groups. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the German-based group of Antifa Ost, along with groups in Italy and Greece, will be labeled specially designated global terrorists. The move is part of President Trump's broader campaign to confront political violence linked to left-wing extremist movements. Rubio said the groups espouse anarchist and Marxist ideologies, using violence to incite political change. The US also target other Antifa groups worldwide. Antifa OST has been linked to attacks in Germany and Budapest, and the US aims to disrupt their operations and deny them funding. Okay, Shruti joins us once again to discuss this. Shruti, your thoughts on Donald Trump labelling these 4 left-wing Marxist Antifa-linked groups terrorist organizations. What does that mean for those groups going forward, even if they are across the ocean?
Antifa by definition is anti-fascist, and what this means is that it is completely left-wing, not at all nationalistic in nature. It is more liberal, more Marxist, more anti-capitalism, more anti-Christianity also in some places. So this particular movement has home issues for Trump, as in we've seen the Los Angeles riots, we've seen Chicago burn. So these particular movements have home ground here in USA, and they find that first, starting from abroad, if they do that and label a few of them as international groups of terrorism, they will be allowed to then snoop into the working of similar groups inside USA. So they will be able to use financial surveillance, digital surveillance, and oversight tools over American citizens who are supporting not just these bodies internationally, but also locally. So this is an outside-in attempt to kind of stop the movements of particularly very violent people who seem to adopt an ideology as a cause of action, which results in a Charlie Kirk-like event where a person is shot for his views. And that can't be acceptable in any kind of world democracy. So this move has broader linkages. But for Greece, I believe the problem is a little difficult, because from what I understand of Greece politics, a few of these Antifa people are contesting elections. And when they are politicians on their own, how do you designate them as terrorists? Either if you do that, then the entire party gets designated as terrorists. And Greece, if that particular region has an Antifa head, then you end up calling that entire region very badly influenced or is completely out of control of the Western ideology of democracy. So the question becomes slightly more complex. It's not as simple as just calling somebody extreme leftists bordering towards terrorism and calling all Antifa and using all your tools to snoop into people's life and kind of control your internal problems by focusing on the international ones.
Yes, Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. It's fascinating stuff. We now move on, and the European Union has approved a major change to its customs rules, ending the duty-free exemption for parcels valued under €150. It means that all goods entering the EU will now face customs duties from the first euro, bringing small online purchases in line with existing VAT rules. EU officials say that the move is designed to address the surge in low-cost imports, particularly from Asia, where they argue has been undermining local businesses and overwhelming customs access. Meanwhile, Denmark's Minister for Economic Affairs says the reform is aimed at creating a fairer and more consistent system for consumers and retailers across Europe. This update is part of a broader effort to modernise EU customs procedures as online shopping continues to grow rapidly across the region. Let's listen in to what Denmark's Minister for Economic Affairs had to say.
Removal of this duty-free threshold means that custom duties will be payable from the first euro on all goods entering the EU, just like value-added tax. This reform primarily concerns the large volume of low-cost goods imported from third countries, in particular from Asia and China.
Now, our final story coming out of Europe. A Belgian court has found Sami Dejou, a former Islamic State fighter, guilty of genocide against the Yazidi minority in Iraq and Syria. Dejou, who was presumed killed in 2016 in an airstrike in Raqqa, Syria, was tried in absentia after Belgian authorities received no formal confirmation of his death. The court convicted him for his role in IS's 2014 campaign of extermination against the Yazidis, including the rape and sexual enslavement of Yazidi women. 2 survivors testified during the trial. This marks Belgium's first trial for mass crimes against the Yazidis, a group subjected to genocide by IS, according to the United Nations. Dejou has previously been convicted of terrorism charges and was linked to the 2015 Paris attacks. He remains a symbol of the brutal campaign that has led to international prosecutions of his fighters across Europe. Well, that's a wrap on NewsX Eurozone this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.